March 11th, 2020. Joe here at Simple Life Show, where the simplest answers are usually the best. Appreciate everybody for joining me today. I'm going to do another quick video. I hope it's quick. I just wanted to make a few points here. I'm going to take a large topic and try to dwindle it down to really all you really need to know about what's going on. It's not so much about the coronavirus. It's not so much about the stock market and of course the turmoil that's coming along with the 2020 elections. We have seen all the way back to 2015 and 16 that a populist movement has been growing. We all know this. We have a movement away from the establishment, and we have entered into a nationalist/populist movement. No one could really deny this. And for the most part, when a lot of people keep bringing up the Nazis and stuff like that in World War II, you will automatically get a lot of upheaval from the right, as well you should. However, I think what mainly a lot of people, they're trying to say something, but they're not saying it the right way. Back during World War II, there was a populist movement in Germany, and a lot of people could say that it was a populist or nationalist movement. You could say it's both, but mainly it's a populist movement because it was a rebellion against the establishment, and those in Germany saw every other country as part of this establishment movement that was just trying to keep them down. Now, I'm not an apologist for, Hitler or anything like that. That is not what this is about. What this is about is cycles. Cycles happen, and grand super cycles is what we really need to be looking at. Grand super cycles are basically 90-year cycles that happen that go from crisis to crisis. It's basically 4 generations. And that's why I have, let me actually put this on a desktop. That's why I have what is called a Strauss-Howe generational theory. And that's what that whole theory is about. If you don't know anything about the Strauss-Howe generational theory, it's quite complicated, but it's really a kind of a sociological type of theory that basically says that every basically 4 generations we have a huge crisis. Now, we can have crises in between, but they are delineated and separated by huge events where populism takes over, where we have wealth gap issues, and where we have tariff issues and a lot of monetary problems. The people basically revolt, and we all start it all over again. Everything collapses and we start all over again. Why do you think so many people are saying that the next great transfer of wealth is going to be happening soon? It's not just because they're trying to sell a book. They are trying to explain something simple in complex terms. It is just a cycle that happens. It has nothing to do with Trump. It has nothing to do with Bernie Sanders or even Joe Biden. Please do not get distracted by the population, by this election that's happening. Please do not get distracted by the coronavirus. Now, the coronavirus is something serious we need to take into consideration as well, but I think it is just another thing that happens that is making this entire black swan that happens every 90 years happen that much faster. Now, we're already on track for this black swan to happen. Now, black swans, a lot of people say that they're unpredictable. And for the most part, they could be correct, that there's been a lot of black swans that have happened, like terrorist attacks and stuff like that can affect the economy. But over the large, grander super cycle of 90 years, this is not something that is just simply a black swan. This is a reset of that cycle that keeps happening. So you've seen the graph where you have babies turning into adults and then turning into elderly and so forth and so on. I mean, you've seen it. It's pretty. That's just one of the cycles that we're all familiar with, our life cycle, and it goes from birth to death and so forth and so on. And the same thing can be happening, that can be said about civilizations and society and how we relate to each other in the context of our economy and how we work together as a species. And what happens is that we have crises that happen that shakes everything up and resets the entire thing. So if we look back, all the way back to the Revolutionary War, right, when this country first started, We had those in Britain, and I'm trying to simplify this because I think in simple terms, and I think most people everywhere want to digest this information in simple terms, and it's just the best way to do it. So the Revolutionary War, we were obviously fighting against the elite. We had a populist movement all the way back then. We were the first populists. The revolutionaries and colonists were the first populists. They were basically warring against the establishment and the elite class. They didn't want to have anything to do with that. They were tired of being taxed and over-tariffed. And tariffs play a huge part in it as well. So when we have a nationalist and a populist movement, tariffs always come into play as well as either something that you employ or something that you are fighting against. We have seen this throughout history. So we go from the Revolutionary War to the Civil War. What was happening then? Obviously, it was an economic issue. It was also a slavery issue. We have the new Republicans that were coming out. And they were the ones that actually formed and gave really a lot of flesh to the populist movement as well. They were warring against those who, that wanted to have slaves, that were waging their own economic wars. So it was time for another upheaval. It was time for things to change once again. That is what happened during the Civil War. Things that the whole cycle restarted again. And then we go to the next super crisis, which is 1929, when the stock market collapsed. This is what happened then. The wealth gap increased at that point, and everyone's talking about the wealth gap right now. But we really saw that express itself predominantly at that time during the pre-crash of the Roaring '20s. We had so much money that was just being infiltrated into the economy. People were making boatloads of money. And then, of course, the economy crashed in simplistic terms, right? And now we're seeing the cycle continue all over again. We see a new populist movement grow out of the wealth inequality, and some say the wealth gap. Some people like, the likes of Ben Shapiro and those, you know him, you love him and stuff like that. I'm not saying he's wrong. But you have a lot of these people in the media who are trying to convince you that capitalism and all that kind of stuff, and I'm not anti-capitalist, I'm just saying that they espouse and they are apologists for any kind of different ism out there, and they say that capitalism raises all ships up, and that might be true, and on a fundamental level that is true. However, the problem comes in when the gap actually keeps widening and widening and widening. You see a lot of the people's now 20 people, I believe, 20 families actually hold more wealth than the bottom 50% of the entire planet. I mean, if that's not something to think about, I don't know what. I know there's a lot of capitalists out there, and I know there's a lot of socialists out there that are following Bernie, but we need to put that to the side. We need to understand where the cycles are actually happening and how we are not going to be able to stop this. It doesn't matter whether Bernie Sanders is president. It doesn't matter whether Joe Biden or Trump or respectively president. It doesn't matter. Trump is not going to stop this because the debt is out of control. It's been out of control for a long time, and it's growing that exponential curve. And we have reached the point where we are going to infinity when it comes to debt. And we're not going to be able to borrow a way out of it. We're just not going to be able to do it because we're not going to be able to pay it back. Consider that the Federal Reserve has continued to lower rates. They don't know what to do either. And every single Band-Aid they put on gets soggier and soggier and soggier as it goes. I had some slides here I wanted to show. This is the income gains widely shared in the early post-war decades. It's from pretty much the end of World War II, all the way up until the present 2020. We can see here, back after the crash and after World War II, everything was pretty much the same as far as growth, right? That's what they're saying, right? That it's going up, right? But if we look at this blue line, it hasn't really been doing much, right? That is the 20th percentile. The 95th percentile, the basically top 5%, has been steadily growing and widening and widening and widening. The more that widens, excuse me, I have pop-ups. The more that widens, the more people tend towards the populist movement. The more people, that's why you see instances of Antifa. You see instances of more people supporting candidates like Bernie Sanders, who is an avowed democratic socialist, doesn't really matter what you call it. But you have a lot of these people, the majority, a lot of the people actually supporting a lot of these ideas as well. Now, there's pros and cons of all these ideas, but my whole point is not arguing that. The whole point of this is to basically explain that these cycles are happening over and over and over again. So we have the widening gap as well. We can see the income gains at the top dwarf those of the middle house incomes. This is from Congressional Budget Office. We see the top 1% grow at 226%, while the middle 60% is at 47%, and it continues to widen. Everything has been stagnant, and that is one of the biggest problems. Moving on to the next slide, we have income concentration at the top has risen sharply since the 1970s. We have to understand that after the crash of 1929, that the Federal Reserve raised the rates all the way up to around 20%. And it stayed there for a while. And then we see the lower the interest rate gets, the more money that's been flooding into the market. A lot of these assets, especially the assets in the bubbles that's in the stock market, has been growing and growing and growing to where the businesses can't justify how big their stocks are. And their earnings do not match well with their valuations. And if you ever consider the Buffett, I think it's called the Buffett. It's called a Warren Buffett figure or something like that. I can't remember. I think I have a slide on here. But back during 1929, it was at, I believe, 50% overvaluation. And now we are closing in on that exact number. We are mirroring it again. So please understand that the reason why there's Antifa out there, the reason why there's so many people that continue to scream about the wealth inequality or wealth gap is because we are at the end of another cycle. Populism and nationalism has taken over. We have once again isolated ourselves. We have raised the tariffs again on other nations, specifically China, because we get most of our stuff from China, unfortunately, but that's just a fact. And some are even saying that this coronavirus was, some sort of weaponized bioweapon in response to the tariffs. There's a lot of conspiracy theories going on, but we need to focus and we need to concentrate on what is really important here, and that is one thing. It is the super cycle. On to the next slide. This is the stock market capitalization to GDP for the United States. So basically what this is it's the same thing as it's a word. It's like the Buffett indicator. That's what I was thinking of, the Buffett indicator. Stock market capitalization to GDP. So everything gets overvalued. Please understand here back in late 2007, this is when another crisis happened. Everything was overvalued. 2000, right? The crash of 2000, the crash of 2007 and 2008. And now here we are again. In 2020, what do you think is going to happen? It's far overvalued, and it's not just the stock market. It is the super cycle. The stock market is just an indicator of that. So don't even pay attention as much as to the stock market when it comes to these indicators on what is really going to be happening, because overall, what this whole super cycle is going back to a transfer of wealth. It means that a lot of this money that has been, and a lot of these assets that have been accumulated over time are going to be transferring into other hands. Everything is going to become super cheap. Hold on to any money that you have. That is the only advice that I can give you. If you want to buy gold, silver, whatever, hold on to it for as long as you can, because here pretty soon, we are going to see the same thing that we saw after the Great Depression. We are going to see the stock market absolutely crash. Everything is going to be devalued. and you can basically go out there and get things on the cheap. I would highly recommend looking into real estate at that point, because everything will be pennies on the dollar. That is what the transfer of wealth is. That is what happened after the Great Depression, before the Great Depression, and so forth. We saw a lot of these tycoons come in and purchase things for the cheap, and that is how they made their super fortunes. It's all part of a cycle. Please understand that. On to some articles here. This is from the Economy and Markets. Video streaming, the final bubble in the 40-90 year tech cycle. This is from December 2nd, 2019. So even they're using the 90-year cycle, right? We have seen the bubbles happen, especially in the tech sector, right? We see this with the invention of computers, cell phones, and further evolution of those types of technologies, the internet, Google and social media and streaming, broadband. You can just pretty much do anything. Of course, now with 5G, everything is turning into a bubble. Everything is turning into a bubble. And we are going to be seeing another crash in the tech market here pretty soon. And if you don't believe me, who is actually leading all of this? There are three companies, basically: Disney, Netflix, and Warner Media. Disney's pretty much buying up everything. Netflix is buying up everything. Comcast, Amazon, Apple. But we're mainly talking about streaming services. So let's go to Netflix stock here. This is on a max. This is all the way back to inception, I guess. But what's really important here is to look at this double dip here. Okay, this was from 2018 to today, so it's 2-year double dip. And what this signifies is that a recession or depression is coming, that this is going to fall. It's going to go into a bearish market, at least a bearish market. But it's just another one of those indicators, especially with the tech market, that we're going to be entering another cycle. We're ending the super cycle. And part of that super cycle is a tech cycle that's coming to an end as well. So we're going to be entering another bear market with that. I thought that was interesting to point that out, so I did that. This is tariff rates. This is why I put this on here. Actually, hold on for a second. Let me just go ahead and open it up in somewhere else so I can see the whole thing. Okay. So this is the tariff rates between France, United Kingdom, USA. Can you see the different cycles here? Now, this only goes up to 2000. Doesn't include what Trump is doing right now to China. But we can see here, back during the Civil War, the USA tariffs went through the roof, all the way up to 40%, right? Fast forward to the next mini crisis. That was the end of one cycle here. Here's a mini Black Swan with the World War II. Tariffs went through the roof here as far as the United Kingdom. Still pretty high for the USA. And we went down. Now, this doesn't show the tariffs for the U.S., but here it is right now, okay? We're at 20.3% for China. U.S., this is from pi.com, Peterson Institute for International Economics, U.S.-China trade war tariffs, up-to-date chart. We can see them going all the way from 3 to 8% to 19 to 20% here in the span of 2 years. Look back at the chart. This is from 2018 to 2020. Look at Netflix. This is just a indicator. You have to look at all the indicators. You have to look at all the signs, because it's written all over the wall. We just have to look at it. We need to stop worrying about who is running for president. We have to stop worrying about the coronavirus. Yes, we have to worry about it. Yes, we have to take precautions, but we have to see what this cycle is doing. We have to prepare. That's what no one is doing. They're buying toilet paper right now. I don't know. Maybe they know something. I don't know. Maybe toilet paper is going to be worth more than gold in the future. I don't know. Moving forward here, this is just something about the populist movement and, where it came from and so forth throughout the 1880s. This is something really about the Civil War and how it really shaped the populist movement. Local political action groups known as Farmer Alliance sprang up among Midwestern Southerners who were discontented because of crop failures, falling prices, and poor marketing and credit facilities. Although it won some significant regional victories, the alliances generally proved politically ineffective on a national scale. Thus, in 1892, their leaders organized a populist or People's Party, and the Farmers' Alliances melted away while trying to broaden their base to include labor and other groups. The populists maintained almost entirely agrarian-oriented. So this is really where the populist movement grew from. Trump has self-identified as a populist. And here going forward, this was just something about more about that. Going forward here, this is populism through the eyes of Hannah Arendt. And she is a pretty famous German person that has done a lot of research on this and thinker. So she examined the issue of a world-famous book, I can't even pronounce that word sometimes. Totalitarianism. Excuse me, I'm not dumb. I can pronounce things. Sometimes I get tongue-tied, so I apologize about that. She wanted to understand what had turned the Democratic Republic of Weimar and the communist USSR into extreme totalitarianism, totalitarian systems. Excuse me. Anyway, Arendt argued that both had a common denominator: populism. You'll have to excuse me. Sometimes I'll have to just take a break here, just for a second, just to tell you that I'm doing all these videos live. Okay, sometimes I read things, sometimes I get tongue-tied with certain things. It's not that I'm just, an idiot. I'm just, things like that happen, so I apologize about that. So she went on to explain that the term populist emerged by the end of the 19th century. It designated social and political movements, like we were talking about, arising from accelerated social transformation process and economic crisis. So this goes along with what I was talking about. The whole cycle, right? The movements are characteristically led by charismatic leaders, right, who have a sound grasp of problems and wishes of the people. These leaders understand how to mobilize masses in order to achieve certain goals. To name a few, Fints in Hungary, Law and Justice in Poland, Syriza in Greece, Danish People's Party in Denmark, Freedom Parties in Austria and Austria, Front National in France, and Alternative for Germany and Germany are populist. She also argued that Nazi Germany and Stalin's USSR started as populist movements, and we can argue for that because that's what a lot of the people really wanted. They were suffering in the streets; they were dying in the streets. The same thing that was happening in Stalin's USSR. People were starving. They needed a movement. They needed a revolution, and that is exactly what happened in these states. Political propaganda of populists is aimed at voters who don't feel representative in the established political system. According to Hannah, these are voters who are ignored and labeled as apolitical by the other established political parties. Hello, deplorables and stuff like that. Does this sound familiar? They are voters without strong political views, providing a perfect target for propaganda. Further, populists gather masses around any concrete political programs. Instead, they gravitate around broad slogans based on racial or class ideologies. This is from 1955. She saw all this coming just as much as people that lived in Italy before the Romans took over. They knew what it was. They invented and they saw this 90-year cycle for what it was. Further on, I just want to stay with this idea. Arendt set out that the argument that the totalitarian movements of Stalin and Hitler started to amass as mass movements, both were populist to a certain extent. The underlying similarities to populist parties are blatant. Even though their racist discord is watered down, their repertoire includes firing orders against refugees, stopping world Judaism, stigmatization of Muslims as barbarians, and so forth. We've seen that in our media a lot, on both sides, right? We see one side as, warring against Israel, and the other side warring against Muslims. What do you think? Why do you think all this is happening right now? All these people saw this for what it really was. Now, I'm not calling Trump Hitler or anything like that. I'm not saying it's the exact same thing, but it's all part of the cycle. It mirrors the same thing. It rhymes. It's not the same thing, but as Mark Twain said, history doesn't always repeat, but it does rhyme. They replaced it with the words keywords. So they replaced populism basically with nationalism and identity. So what does that mean? People on the right are nationalism. People on the left are identity politics. Hello. This is what's happening all over again. It's just another cycle. This was from Pew Social Trends. This is a trend, and this is not just more trends in income and wealth inequality. There's no point in really getting into that. We all know that there is a massive inequality between those who have it all, or most of it, and those who don't. And trust me, that is going to be changing here pretty soon. Whether you like it or not, whether you vote for Trump or you vote for Bernie Sanders or Joe Biden, it doesn't matter. It's all part of a cycle. This is what happens. There is a wealth transfer, and it's going to be happening soon. This is from December 17th, 2019. U.S. stock market is a bubble. 2020 is coming. So here it reads, the S&P 500 looks like to have entered a bubble. It is an early stage bubble that appears to have just begun. If nothing changes to stop it, we could see 5,000 in 2 to 3 years. I think we've already seen that. It's hard to judge the terminal of a bubble or the speed of it because the higher it goes, the faster it goes until the trend is parabolic. Let me see. So this is, just another article talking about the bubble that's forming, the asset bubbles that are forming right now. Here's another interesting article where we're talking about the Buffett indicator. Buffett indicator, warns stock dooms for worse crash than 2008. We have already talked about that. We are already seeing that right now in real time. Buffett indicator flashed red before the Great Recession hit in 2008. It also flashed red before Buffett was even really thought about back in 1929. But it was at all-time highs at that point as well. Today indicates the stock market is an even worse bubble than the last two times valuations collapsed. And we obviously talked about the tech sector, the dot-com crash. Warren Buffett predicted stock returns would fall dramatically in a rare 1999 speech about the overall market. He talks about this as well. Let's see. Okay, here it is down here. His 1999 remarks spell doom after the stock market's bull run in 2019. The fact is the markets behave in ways, sometimes before a very long stretch, that are not linked to value. Sooner or later, though, value counts. That's what we're seeing right now. The stock market is highly, highly overvalued. I've been screaming this for months. He summarized the natures of equities bubbles. Bear in mind this critical fact often ignored, that investors as a whole cannot get anything out of their business except what the businesses earn. Sure, you and I can sell each other's stocks at higher and higher prices, but that doesn't matter. It's only based on earnings. If the actual price does not justify the earnings, then you have a collapse. And he says the absolute most that the owners of a business in aggregate can get out of it in the end between now and judgment date is what the business earns over time, and that's it. Because the stocks, they're not going to be worth anything after they crash, right? And this is another recent article, March 10th. That was yesterday. Reliable Buffett indicator may have predicted this market crash. This is all part of the cycle. That is the whole point of what I'm trying to say here. I know that it's run a little bit long. I'm at 30 minutes now. I looked at the Black Swan Google Trends. We can see how more and more people are becoming interested in Black Swans. That's just over the last year, 12 months. It's grown. Let me see. This is something about the federal fund rates history. We looked at how the federal fund rates have impacted everything. And all of these are just all of these things they're just indicators. All they are is simply just indicators about what is happening, what is going to be happening over the next few months. I wouldn't even say year now. I would say over the next few months. I hope that we can extend this out, but we are looking down basically the abyss of another complete crash and a crisis. And this is going to not just be simply a crisis, it's going to be a reset. And a lot of people are saying that it's just calm down, everything is going to be okay. I'm not saying that you need to panic. Also, I'm also not saying that you just need to be calm and you just need to be, just forget about it and be apathetic. You need to understand these cycles happen, so when it does happen, you'll know why. I'll see you in the next video. Have a great day. Have a great one. Bye.